Good morning, everyone, and welcome to AZBioPEERS. AZBioPEERS is a program designed to help our entrepreneurial community connect, share information, and grow together. We are thrilled to have some wonderful speakers this morning as we look at the SBIR program, the impact that it is having on the state of Arizona, and the impact that it will have also on people around the world. And so with that, we'll kick things off. And I want to give a big shout out to Dylan PA, who coordinates this program at AZ Advances and is the person that puts all this programming together for all of you. So with that, my name is Joan Kerber-Walker. I am the president and CEO of AZBio and chairman of the board of the Opportunity Through Entrepreneurship Foundation, or OTEF. With that, I'd like to give our speakers a chance to tell you a little bit about them and their organizations. Wiley, would you like to kick us off?
Absolutely. Thanks, Joan. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. My name is Wiley Larson. I am Director of SBIR STTR programs and university partnerships at the Arizona Commerce Authority. I've been here a little over a year and love working here. I've worked in tech transfer and commercialization for over 15 years. An entrepreneur myself with a couple of startups and a multi-SBIR applicant. And so ACA is the state's economic development department. So we're technically an authority, but function like a state agency. Our goals are pretty simple. We're here to attract businesses to Arizona, grow businesses that are in Arizona, and create and support new businesses in Arizona. And I get to play a role on that kind of create and grow section as part of the venture development and innovation strategy team. So looking forward to sharing a little bit more about that later on.
Awesome. And, AZBio and the Arizona Commerce Authority work very closely together, and both of us have statewide mandates. But it's also important to recognize that we have life science innovators making a difference across our state. And we're thrilled that we have, representation from both Tucson and Scottsdale today. And so, Evan, would you like to do your introduction?
Hi, well, thank you, Joan, and it's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Evan Unger, and I've founded 4 biotech companies. The first made what is now the world's #1 selling injectable microbubble, has 80% market share in the United States for echocardiography. And indeed, that first company was catalyzed by SBIR funding. I have 2 current companies that I've either founded or co-founded. One is Nuvox Pharma that you see here. Nuvox Pharma, continuing this work sort of on microbubbles, has nanobubbles for oxygen delivery and is currently close to finishing a phase 2b trial in brain cancer. And we're very close to finishing that. And then we have a large-scale trial in ischemic stroke in the United Kingdom, and also a trial in respiratory distress in Canada. The other company is Microvascular Therapeutics, or MVT, and that company has finished a phase 2 trial of a new contrast agent, a new microbubble to compete with the old one for echocardiography and theranostic products. And in the course of my career, I've had over $20 million in SBIR grants of various forms.
Awesome. Thank you, Evan and Todd.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Joan and Dylan. So I am a neurologist, practiced here in Phoenix since the late 90s. So sadly getting close to 30 years now. And my interest in my subspecialty training was actually in the peripheral nervous system. So studying nerves, not of the brain and the spinal cord, but the nerves in the body. And I had founded a company actually based in Texas where at a time about 15 or 20 years ago, we could take small little skin biopsies and then look at the nerves in the skin to look for the health of those peripheral nerves. And then about 10 years ago, partnered with two neurologists from Harvard who sort of took that one step further and said, yes, we can see the nerves in the skin with this technology, but let's actually see if there are accumulations of proteins within the nerves that could be reflective of certain diseases. And we know now, for example, that the major neurodegenerative diseases, so Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, Lou Gehrig's disease, the hallmark of all of these diseases, if you look in the brain, is the buildup of these proteins. But we've never had a way, in someone's lifetime to be able to look at those proteins. So we founded C&D Life Sciences about 10 years ago to begin that quest and to say, can we start to identify these proteins through the peripheral nervous system as a window into the central nervous system? And we'll talk more, but we're lucky enough in our very early nascency of a company to get an SBIR grant. We've now had three additional SBIR grants, and we commercialized testing 5 years ago. We now serve neurologists and patients in all 50 states where they take the biopsies, they ship them to the lab in Scottsdale, and we've done almost 50,000 patients over the past 5 years.
So Todd, one of the things we really want to focus on is not just the money that comes through SBIR and the jobs that are created by these companies, but the impact on patients. And my Aunt Joan, I was named after her, lived with Parkinson's disease. And her journey was one of diagnostics, trial and error. Can you help our audience understand the major impact that this test is having on the ability of a physician to get patients answers quicker? And more importantly, what does that mean to their prognosis as they go through treatment?
Yeah, so the challenge, I think still today, a lot of the reason I think medical students choose not to do neurology is it is a field without a lot of objectivity, right? So we see somebody, shuffles into my office and they have a rest tremor, and we say that they look Parkinsonian. Okay. But there are many diseases that can make somebody look Parkinsonian. Not all of them are Parkinson's disease. Some are much more aggressive even than Parkinson's disease. Some respond differently to even the symptomatic medicines that we might use. And so there is a lot of diagnostic confusion. And we know, for example, even at the best academic centers, so Yale, Harvard, Stanford, if those specialists in Parkinson's disease, that if their patients come to autopsy, that they are wrong about 10 to 30% of the time. And I like to joke and say, I would not have gotten through medical school if I was wrong 30% of the time. Yet in the real world, as we treat patients, we accept the fact that we're wrong 30% of the time. So we make a diagnosis, we treat, we evaluate. If the patient doesn't respond the way that we think, we reevaluate and then reevaluate and more tests and more attempts at therapies. So it is very frustrating for the patient and their family, very frustrating even for the doctor because we don't have those tests. And so what our test, the SIN1 test, has been able to provide, and I think the reason there's been such acceptance is we can now visualize the protein that accumulates in Parkinson's disease and allow us to separate true Parkinson's disease from all the other Parkinsonian diseases, which again have very different prognosis and very different treatments. So I think we've helped provide a lot of diagnostic clarity to 50,000 patients, across the country, and that's growing every month. The other piece of that that's so critical is now imagine you're a pharmaceutical company and you're trying to run a trial where you enroll people with Parkinson's disease, but you know that you might be enrolling 30% of the people that don't have the disease because we know that from autopsy studies. So it is very likely that many therapeutic agents that we've studied for diseases like Parkinson's have failed because the patient selection has been wrong, right? So if I put 30% of the people into a trial for Parkinson's who don't have Parkinson's, that trial could never work, right?
Right.
And so we are now partnering with many pharmaceutical companies, from little biotech startups to, the big companies in the world, to say, can we look at patient homogeneity? And can we be sure that we enroll the right patients so we can actually have the big breakthroughs? And I'll take just 60 more seconds to tell a story that I tell, because I think a lot about what are the major medical breakthroughs, the real, what I'll call medical miracles that have happened in my lifetime. And I think for me, one of the biggest examples of that is HIV, right? So when I was training as a resident, everybody with HIV died of HIV. Now, nobody should die of HIV, right? So what changed in 30 or 40 years? And basically, there were two things that changed. The first was we had the ability to measure the virus, what we call the viral load. And we could measure that very, very rapidly. And then we had, now I don't know how many drugs, but 50 drugs that treat HIV. But what we've learned is that not everybody with HIV responds to the same drug. So we give them a cocktail, we measure the virus. If it doesn't come down, we give them another cocktail. These devastating neurodegenerative diseases are probably the same thing, right? Not everybody with Alzheimer's gets there the same. Not everybody with Parkinson's gets there the same. So unless we have a way to measure that biomarker and say, yes, we're really changing the course of the disease, where we can measure that rapidly and then test a bunch of drugs, we really need that two-pronged approach, the biomarker objective measure of disease activity, and then pharma to catch up and give us a bunch of drugs. So that's where the real medical breakthrough is going to come from. And we think, we're playing a part in that by providing the objective measure of this biomarker.
Awesome. And, so I never really thought of Ciendia as both a theranostic and a diagnostic company, but you are both. So, Evan, the work that Nuvox has done and that your predecessor companies have done um, have impacted both acute medical situations like a stroke, where responding quickly is essential, as well as um, diseases that we hope to manage as chronic diseases like brain tumors. Um, Help us understand, the SBIR journey. I mean, what you mentioned the amount of time, and the number of grants you've had across these multiple companies. Um, but take one and give us a feel for, what it's like to apply for that first SBIR, if you remember. And now, as you continue through the process and you do phase ones and you do phase twos and you perhaps get contracts that are even beyond SBIR, what is that journey like?
So it's kind of a little funny story. The first SBIR, I had done my residency in radiology at Washington University, St. Louis, and spent a couple years in Philadelphia, and ended up here in Tucson as an assistant professor. And I had invented gas-filled liposomes, or so I thought they were, because that can be an ultrasound contrast agent, the microbubble. And I had a colleague, Terry Matsunaga, who was doing his postdoc in Victor Ruby's lab. And I wrote this grant, and I said, well, we have to have a PI, a principal investigator, who has to be an employee of the company. We write this grant, we get it. Would you really be willing to be the PI? And so he said he would, and then we got this grant and SBIR, and that was a phase one, and then we got the phase two, which was more funding, and with that, and I invented a couple other contrast agents at the time, which were grass, generally recognized as safe. So I was able to get those into human studies under IRB, rather than having to do full farm talks. So um, Contrast agents were hot back then because the new non-ionic X-ray agents were big drugs, and so they wanted to fill their pipelines, the company. So I out-licensed the first two agents, and then on the basis of the SBIR grants and working with Dr. Matsunaga, we were able to take the a new injectable microbubble, which is now called Definity, into clinical trials and run it through phase 2, and then licensed it to DuPont and Yamanouchi in Japan. And the total milestones and licensing fees were something like $100 million after that. And if I were a better businessman, it would have been even more. But that ultrasound imaging is non-invasive. It's safe. It's ubiquitous. And the contrast agents improve the accuracy of ultrasound. And so let's say Definity has over 80% market share in the United States for echocardiography. It's selling 350 million a year, growing 14% a year. And this is what we developed as a spin out of the SBIR. And it if you have an MRI, okay, that's more expensive, and gadolinium is toxic, and that's an alternative. Or you can do a CAT scan, and that has radiation, and the iodine is actually much more toxic. The bubbles are much higher safety factor and extends the reach of a diagnostic modality that is ubiquitous and safe. And so then I discovered that the microbubbles could be used as cavitation nuclei to capture the ultrasound energy and then to do gene delivery, drug delivery, treating clots. And that was the genesis of the second company that actually went public and did sonothrombolysis using ultrasound and microbubbles to treat ischemic stroke. And then, sort of one thing leads to another. And I discovered that microbubbles could be used for oxygen delivery. And that led to the discovery of the nanobubbles, which Nuvox is using for oxygen delivery. And hypoxia, the lack of oxygen or low oxygen in the tissue, causes more morbidity and mortality than any other single condition affecting mankind. And so we have what we believe, and that's supported by a lot of data, the most effective means of reversing hypoxia that has ever entered clinical study. And so if you take brain cancer, glioblastoma, the survival really hasn't changed over the last 20 years. It went from, say, 12 months to maybe 14 and a half months. And tumors are low oxygen. It's sort of a survival mechanism of the tumors. But radiation works because of oxygen. So in our phase 2A trial, we had a 40% improvement in overall survival. And then got phase 1, phase 2, and phase 2B SBIR funding from the NCI. And the phase 2B was quite helpful to fund a chunk of the phase 2B trial, which is now close to completion. And about 6 to 9 months from now, we'll be able to unblind the data and hopefully show that we've made a significant impact on this dreadful disease. And then we have similar programs occurring in stroke, which is and respiratory distress. And stroke is responsible for more long-term medical care costs than any other disease in the United States, because stroke survivors that need, help with daily living. And in our phase 2A trial, not only was it safe, but we had a significant improvement in the functional outcome. So hopefully we'll be able to, it's a large scale study being done by the UK government, 150 subjects, funded by the UK government, because stroke is a leading cost of care in the UK as here. And then we did get BARDA funding for respiratory distress, and that is about midway through in Canada.
So, I think there are a couple of takeaways that I got, and Evan, thank you for sharing that because your journey is truly an SBIR success story. But, the other thing that is really important that came out of those comments is the US federal government is not the only one funding health innovation, right? They help us in these early stages, but it is a global community of private investors, nations, health systems, et cetera, that all come together to take those early discoveries, start to move them into the commercialization process and development process, et cetera. So that journey can be pretty tricky. And while AZBio has the luxury of being laser focused on Arizona's health innovation ecosystem, Wiley, you have a broader mandate because the SBIR programs are not exclusive to health. So can you help understand, what is that broader impact for SBIR here in Arizona? And how is ACA helping those companies create that impact?
Absolutely, Joan. Thank you. I first became kind of aware of the SBIR program about 20 years ago. I was ironically working for a congressman and heard about the SBIR program in my home state of Nebraska. I grew up in a town of about 3,000 people, and we had a small plastics manufacturer in that town, probably employed 50, 75 people. And we're over time, they were able to get a contract for building a plastic structural piece for the F-16 Falcon fighter plane. And when we started to realize, and that was a huge impact for our community, that added another 50 jobs, in a town that's agriculturally based and it's kind of population is dwindling, help keep our schools going and all these different things. And so as we started to think about this, a company of that size doesn't necessarily have a lot of their own resources to be able to do their own R&D. And so, but clearly they know how to get government contracts. They know how to get manufacture. They know how to serve a client. So the SBIR program, I think in its originality was really kind of designed in these types of scenarios where you have small businesses who have the capacity to build other products, but maybe don't have the resources to do it. And so when we're looking at things, whether it's aerospace and defense, whether it's biotech, whether it's, and clearly in the semiconductor industry right now, where we're seeing all this growth, we're trying to figure out how can we continue to build that supply chain through the SBIR program and other ways to help more startups become more successful and to help existing manufacturers who have taken products all the way to the end to be able to have the resources and have a higher success rate in those cases. So the impact in Arizona is huge, as we've seen in the last couple of decades. The primes, the big industries are not licensing technologies at the earlier stages as they were originally. So now you have amazing universities who are doing research, and you have companies looking for things that have are past proof of concept. All of the challenges of how do we replicate, how do we scale, how do we multiply, manufacture. And so this development, I've kind of the soapbox I've been on lately is we have to decouple research and development, because the research is taking place largely at the universities, some development, but how do you get a product, as these gentlemen know, and probably many of our audience, where you have a great discovery that's done by really, really smart people in really, really controlled environment in on really, really expensive equipment. And now you have to figure out how do you get that to a point where a normal person can use it in a normal environment, and it doesn't cost so much that you can't afford to do it. And that's development, and that's what the SBIR program does. And it's a challenge to find that funding, and it's a challenge to find that person that is willing to do late nights in the lab, do late nights writing the grant writing, doing all of those the heavy lifting to win these grants and get that further down the road and to do it at pace, right?
Yeah.
And I think Evan mentioned postdocs, and now his first SBIR was having that postdoc that could do that. And so those are some of the things we're working on at the ACA. We get about 70 million in SBIR funding into the state of Arizona each year. It's less than 1/50th, so you can do the math. We'd like to get those numbers up a little bit, but also, creating a path for success. So whether it's a small business that's already manufacturing or it's a startup coming out of a university, we want to support those companies and help them grow.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting as I look back. So I first started having conversations with people in Washington about the SBIR program when I was a member of the Board of Trustees of the National Small Business Association in Washington, D.C. And so I have been, having these conversations since 2006 and, helping our elected leaders understand the importance of programs like this. Also, there are states, unfortunately, at this time, Arizona is not one of them, although we hope that with the AZ Advances program, we'll be able to address that, offer matching grants because there is a lag time between when you finish a phase one, where you've basically done a small proof of concept, and then you move to the phase two, where you are going to actually be building on that proof of concept and really focusing on development. And so, as we look at the program, right, a lot of the things that members of Congress are talking about right now are how do we make this program even more impactful? What we've seen here in Arizona is partially thanks to the SBIR program, our economic impact as a life science industry, not including our hospitals, has grown from in 2016, the economic impact, that's wages, jobs, and all of that ancillary support system. That's what economic impact is. And so that number in 2016 was $23.16 billion. 7 years later, in 2023, that number had grown to $43.67 billion. Now, let me tell you, if I was still leading a public company, I would be really pleased with those growth numbers. But what we look at is the SBIR program is improving health. It is driving technology. It is helping these small businesses become bigger businesses and create jobs and opportunities for employees. But it also has a major impact on the infrastructure and the tax base of the states. And so, if I were a member of Congress, I would be looking at what can I do to continue to grow and improve the quality of life for people in my state. And SBIR is an excellent, program. The other thing that many people don't realize is, this budgeting is a big conversation right now, because the federal budget has to be done by September 30th. And but what most people don't realize is there's no budget line item for SBIR. So the SBIR program is actually a set aside from the budgets of the existing agencies that participate in the program. And so we're not talking about spending more money when we reauthorize SBIR. What we're talking about is using the money that we've already decided to spend in a way that grows our small businesses and fosters innovation. So, Todd, when we talk about this dual benefit, I got to tell you, every Sunday night I put together the AZ Bio in the Loop newsletter. And part of that newsletter has jobs. And I have to check every Sunday night because just about every week I have a new job from CND Life Sciences.
Yeah.
So, so help me understand, when we talk about the impact, what kind of opportunity is this creating for the people that work with you?
Yeah, so we like to think that we're a great poster child for the SBIR program because it really was the impetus for growth. So I tell people the story that when we started the lab, it was myself, it was the two co-founders, also neurologists at Harvard, and we decided to put the lab here in Phoenix, in large part because it was a whole lot cheaper than building a lab in Boston. But it was teeny, it was 200 square feet. And the only employee at the time, the only person who worked in the lab was actually my son, who had just graduated from WashU, Evan, and was taking a year off before starting his MD PhD program, which he just completed down at U of A. And so, all the deliveries came to my garage because he wasn't there all the time. And then we would, schlep them over to the lab. We were literally a garage lab when we started. And the first SBIR grant that we got really, I think, was impactful for a number of reasons. So the first was it allowed us to actually design, a 30-site multi-center prospect study to validate the technology. And so we published that in JAMA last year. And that really has been the backbone to validate our technology as a diagnostic company. So we would not have been able to do that without the SBIR grant. At the time when we got the SBIR grant, the three of us were self-funding the company, literally writing checks every month just to pay for bills. So that was about $3 million, dollars, and that really was the catalyst to get that large validation study completed. But then the second part of it is, I think, something also that we can't overlook, which is that SBIR grant provided sort of independent validation of the potential for the technology, right? So it's one thing for me as a founder, or Chris and Roy as founders, to go sit in front of people about to, give venture money, right? And say, we believe in this. But that SBIR approval, that first grant really allowed us to say, hey, look, the government believes in us too. And so if you look at kind of what we've raised from, being that garage lab to now, it's about half and half. So we've gotten 4 SBIR grants, we got an ARPA grant. I don't know exactly the number, but somewhere that's about 16 to 20 million dollars. And then because of that validation and the science that we've been able to do, we've raised another 20 plus million in private financing, right? So I think that validation piece from the SBIR really allowed us to grow. And so in terms of growth from that little teeny lab with just my son, we're now in about 35,000 square feet up in North Scottsdale. We now have 200 employees in the company in many states, actually, throughout the country, but obviously the largest number here in Arizona in the facility. And so it is a tremendous story of growth and that partnership between, federal funding, which allowed us to get started and has allowed us to continue to advance the science, but then also the private funding to bring that money in from investors, again, all over the country, to really kind of continue that growth that we've been able to see.
Yeah. And that is so important. And I know, in Tucson, um, Evan, you've worked so closely with the university and with the students, and a lot of your workforce, I think, has come out of the university. How has your ongoing relationship with SBIR helped your workforce?
Well, it's you're probably aware of the difficult funding environment for clinical stage biotechs right now. It's so it's lean time in terms of investor funding. And you look at initial public offerings in the biotech space, it's a desert right now. Well, this SBIR funding's been very helpful to keep our projects going, and it does validate our technology. We've also um, been able to get DoD funding in addition, and the DoD funding seems to be less problematic right now than SBIR. And I was at Bio, and actually NIH invited me to speak on a symposium because of the SBIR funding that I've had. But the ARPA-H is supposed to become more important in the future, and so I'm trying to figure to get into that. But we enjoy being able to hire these bright young scientists out of the University of Arizona and sort of serve as mentorship for some of them for their careers, and been fortunate over the years to have many interns come through who've then gone on to get their PhDs or go to medical school. So that's one of the real rewarding things about doing this, doing new science, um, and then being able to build or help to build the ecosystem in Southern Arizona.
Yep. Thank you. And, Wiley, as you and I have been talking, the most valuable input that we can provide to our members, our elected leaders, as they have to make decisions for the good of Arizona and for the good of the country, um, is to make sure that they have good stories from home. And, you and I have been reaching out to the SBIR community on the health side and those Arizona companies and saying, hey, we need you to tell your story, right? We need you to send Joan an email showing how you're making that impact. And we have, the webpage where we're building, those stories. And this video is going to be there too. And that's a resource that our elected leaders can use to educate themselves so that they can make good decisions. And so, one of the things, and we're really focusing right now on the SBIR, but there are other federal programs that have had a huge impact, right? Obviously, the Bayh-Dole Act, which, took that research and development that was sitting on the shelves at the NIH and not being used, and actually move that into the universities, move that into development with small companies, and have those things start benefiting people because our tax dollars paid for that work at the NIH, right? We wanted to benefit people. And so that's very important. And then what many people don't realize is that SBIR is one type of funding that goes into these small and growing companies. And contracts, as Evan was highlighting, is another, right? So there are very often times when there are small business set asides, not necessarily because it's specific to research, but there is work that the federal government that needs done, that these small businesses can do, and those small business contractual set asides, which are beyond the SBIR program, are also essential, right? And I think about spacesuits that have been made in Tucson, Arizona, and infrastructure that's been developed for mining up in Scottsdale. Think of Scottsdale and mining together, but one of the leading companies that have developed that canary in the coal mine type of technology is based in Scottsdale. And so, as we look at these small businesses across the state, these SBIR funds and these STTR funds, which is where we're partnering with the university, and then the follow-on federal contracts make a huge difference. So, Wiley, one of the ways that you have kind of that inside scoop on who gets the SBIR stuff, is you have the FAST Grant program.
Yes.
So what is FAST Grant?
Yes. Fast Grant is actually it's what a lot of people call a phase 0, right? So the SBIR program is typically phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 0 is a program where we provide a little bit of funding, a micro grant, $3,000, to help founders and researchers retain a SBIR grant writing consultant to help them be more successful in that first phase 1. And so this is part of, actually, we got some great news right at the end of last week. Super important program. The SBA manages it. They've recognized it, and they've found a little bit of funding to continue that program for the upcoming year. And so we're definitely excited about that. And that will allow ACA to provide 15 $3,000 grants to companies in Arizona to help them be more successful in that phase 1 proposal. And these are the challenge here. They're great grants. And to Todd's point about the validation, about 10% of phase 1s get funded, and so super competitive. And even if you have an incredible CV, it still does come down to how are you going to commercialize this, and that has to be touched on in the phase 1, and then it has to be really outlined in the phase 2. So people who we've got a number of approved consultants that we easily will allow these companies who win these grants to use. There's also 5 travel awards to attend the SBIR conference, which takes place in Raleigh in March as part of the FAST program. And we also do SBIR workshops to help founders and entrepreneurs who've never applied before kind of understand. Like you can spend 2 weeks just getting all of the registrations done if you've not done that before. So that's what the FAST Grant is about, to get more access, to get more people involved in that process. And the stories, send us your stories. It's amazing. We learned at the last SBIR conference that the private return for the SBIR program is 8.5x. So for every dollar this is from the SBA, every dollar that comes through the SBIR program equates to 8.5x in private investment and an additional 2x in government contracting. So the returns are amazing. It's an excellent program, and sometimes it leads to these other funding opportunities. Evan mentioned ARPA-H. The DoD has all kinds of contracting opportunities, including biotech, that they offer. And once they kind of see some success, it actually becomes a lot faster to go after some of those contracts. And we do believe we're going to continue to see the DoD funded at levels equal to or higher than they've been before in this administration. So yeah, and we're here to help in any way we can to try to help people be more successful. And just a note too is that NSF, they have like a pre-proposal process now, and NSF absolutely does biotech. About almost a third of their portfolio is bio and healthcare. They see 12,000 project pitches a year, and so those are the 2-page pre-proposals. So it's super competitive, and we want to be more competitive in Arizona.
Awesome. Thank you. So healthcare spending in the United States this year is projected to be $1.3 trillion. I wish I had $1.3 trillion. Actually, so does the federal government wish they had $1.3 trillion to pay for this. Health innovation is obviously making life better for patients. But health innovation is also our opportunity to bend the healthcare cost curve. because, as we know, but the audience may not know, the number one part of healthcare spending is in the hospital. It's not drugs, it's not medical devices. It's that hospital care. It's that crisis situation. It's having a team of healthcare professionals around you, a massive infrastructure that is needed to help you at your most difficult moments. But the best way to keep people out of the hospital is to help them be healthy, help them have health care at home, help them navigate or recognize disease early when we're more successful in treating it. And that to me, Todd, was like one of the big things when I saw CND, and having known my family struggle to go through this, is understanding that if the sooner you know, the sooner interventions start, and you can never reverse the damage, but you can slow it down. That's so important. And,
Yeah.
we look at, Evan, you were talking about the contrast agents and the microbubbles, and, the alternatives are things, for instance, with iodine. My dad was allergic to iodine. I mean, he couldn't even eat shrimp. Those diagnostics tests, he wouldn't work for him. And so, your technology gave physicians and healthcare professionals options to help patients that need that. And when we look at helping a stroke victim, Evan, because we're not all doctors like you guys, Evan, help me understand the importance of addressing hypoxia in a stroke patient in those early minutes after the stroke.
So the neurons in the part affected by the stroke die, and they die depending upon how much blood flow there is there. And the goal of stroke treatment, I'm talking ischemic stroke, which is the blockage of the blood vessel, which is 85% of strokes, is to restore the blood flow. And it takes time to do that. And during that time, the brain is dying. So our drug is safe, and it delivers the oxygen to the brain that has the absence of blood flow or the decrease in blood flow to keep the neurons, the cells alive in the brain until reperfusion is obtained. And as I said, the phase 2A stroke trial, it was actually amazing. It's a blinded study, but they could tell they give the drug and then the patient can suddenly move their arm, and they couldn't move it before they get the drug. Or the patient couldn't speak, and then after getting the drug, the patient can speak. And so then the patients are, during this time, treated with, there's a drug called TPA that restores the blood flow, or the real breakthrough in stroke has been what's called mechanical thrombectomy, where they thread the catheter up into the brain, they snare the clot and remove it. And so if you're in Phoenix, you've got some good places to go in Tucson. But if you're in Yuma, they're probably going to transfer you to Phoenix. And by the time you get there, your brain's going to be gone. But if you had our drug in Yuma, they'd give it to you there and send you to Phoenix and preserve your brain. And so, stroke is, I think, the third most common cause of mortality, but it's completely devastating to people who survive, who go from being functional to flat on their back with a urinary catheter and a feeding tube. So very expensive to take care of those people and very poor quality of life. And so we believe that our drug can fundamentally improve these outcomes, but also lower healthcare costs because of decreasing the need for long-term care.
So I have this, I'm going to put you two on the spot. So I have this discussion with are entrepreneurs, not just here in Arizona, but around the country because of some of my national responsibilities. And so this is a question I ask. If we didn't have the SBIR and STTR programs, would your companies be where they are today? And would the health innovations that you have created earlier in your career have ever gotten to patients? Evan.
So, I talked about this first grant that I got, and it led to a product that is developing $350 million a year, still growing 14%. It's a significant product, but there's serendipity. And so if I hadn't gotten that grant, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And sort of one thing has led to another. It isn't like I planned to do this and knew that I'd be able to do it. It's sort of, I was lucky, very lucky to work with people like I mentioned, Dr. Matsunaga and others, but it it uh, it may have been this SBIR funding. Maybe we wouldn't be where we are today, and I never would have been able to really get started. So I think it was very, very important.
Todd, you're in the hot seat. It's your turn.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think we would be anywhere near where we are right now. I mean, as we've heard, there are always ways to try to find money, and so you never know for sure. But again, there were so many things that came from that grant along the lines of commercialization, and including the fact that we were able to hire our CEO. So again, the three stupid doctors were trying to run this company. And we could actually bring in somebody with life science experience and a CEO that understands how to grow a business. And again, I think, Rick Morello has done an amazing job for us over the past 5 to 6 years, and the growth is, very much on his shoulders. And so, we wouldn't have been able to afford him had it not been for the SBIR grant. And I think, the other thing that's important, and obviously, Evans had tremendous success, and we've had luck and serendipity as well. Anytime the government or any granting agency gives money, it's a gamble, right? I mean, research is a gamble, right? So you're looking at two people who've been successful, and I don't know what the numbers are for the people who got SBIRs that went to nothing, but my guess is it's probably more than a majority. I mean, most money that you invest in research turns into things that just don't go anywhere. Hopefully, we learn something along the way and inform the next step. So it's hopefully never a complete failure. But these are gambles, and Wiley, to your point, the return on investment, 8, 10 fold. That's what should convince Congress that these are gambles worth making, because we can't say an investment in CND or an investment in Nuvox is ever going to get anywhere for sure, because we don't know. But if you're willing to make 5 of those gambles and one of those 5 turn out and has a 10x return, that's something that legislatures understand, right? That's a win. And so I think the numbers, again, I don't know them, you probably know them better, but my guess is the numbers kind of bear that out, which is that in addition to just the science that we learn from failed experiments, and often we learn more from failed experiments than from successful ones, this is all just a gamble. And you want to say at the end of the day, did the House win or did the Congress win? And we want Congress to win so that they keep putting more money into this. So.
Yep. And, Wiley, as you and I have talked about, the process of research, and here in Arizona, our research enterprise has grown significantly, and we're deeply appreciative to the investments that the state has made, right? The state has invested over $1.5 billion in university research infrastructure over the last 20 years. The people of Arizona, thanks to that little 0.8, on the sales tax, have invested. We, the people, not the state, the people, almost $2 billion into health and university research. And sometimes we look at some of this stuff, even in the SBIR program, and say, that's kind of esoteric. I mean, really? Is that important? And, I remember having a conversation with a very respected scientist, and he had been studying yeast. And I was like, yeast? Who cares about yeast? Well, it turns out that yeast is pretty important. And many years later, that scientist got the Nobel Prize in medicine for the work that he did in yeast and how it changed the world. So very often, when we hear public commentary and they're looking through this list of all of these awards and they look at it and they say, really? You wanted to know about that? Remember the yeast. So, as we're, wrapping things up and we're coming up to the end of our hour, I want to give each of you a minute to do that closing thought. Um, and Wiley, we started with you today, so I'll let you go first.
All right. Well, thank you, Joan, for putting this together, and the organizations in Arizona have been, just really, really amazing in working with our congressmen and senators to get the news out about how beneficial this program is. And so I love that Arizona is taking a leadership role in this and making sure that this gets reauthorized. And so we're confident it is. It sounds like it's going to happen. But as always, there's details that have to be worked out. So, but we continue to ask everyone to share their stories, to call, write letters to their congressional delegation, whatever it takes, and we know that this is gonna get reauthorized because it's supporting entrepreneurs, scientists, businesses that are saving lives and making quality of life better, which is the goal. So
Great. Thanks, Wiley. And Evan?
It's an important program, and to the entrepreneurs out there who are interested, um, I'm an inventor, but any success I've had has been because of the collaborations that I've developed in working with teams. And so most of my SBIR grants, I've had them as multi-PI, where I'm trying to develop some new technology, but I identify someone who is a leader in their particular field and develop collaboration with them. And so that's sort of a tip to you. If you can find someone else to work with who brings the extra value that you need, it's going to increase your chances of getting the funding and also of successfully developing something meaningful.
Awesome. Thanks, Evan. And Todd,
Last
they're
last
up.
word. Yeah. So again, just to echo, I think what we've said already, which is just how critical the SBIR program has been for C&D, and how much it has helped us grow. We just, as I mentioned, I think we just got our fourth SBIR grant about 4 weeks ago, which will start a really important study in terms of looking at earlier and earlier detection for Parkinson's. To your point, which is, if you wait till somebody has Parkinson's, they've already lost about 60% of the nerves of that part of their brain. It's going to be very difficult to reverse that. We need to slow it down much earlier. And then just as a final softball point, I do want to say, as I mentioned earlier, that, when we began to decide where to put this lab, the two choices were Boston because my two co-founders were at Harvard, and then Phoenix, and we made the decision for Phoenix. And it has been an amazing ecosystem for us to grow in. There is, a lot of expertise between Tucson and Phoenix, and we've gotten a lot of great talent from right out of ASU, right out of U of A, to people that are much more developed in their careers. And to Evan's point, really great collaborations. While this call was happening, my co-founder was on a call with Roche down in Tucson. We collaborate with TGen, with U of A, with ASU now. So it is a growing and really impressive ecosystem here in Arizona for startup companies like us.
Absolutely. And, we're getting national attention on the work that's being done in Parkinson's here in Arizona. And the World Parkinson's Conference is coming to Arizona in
Yep,
2026.
yep, yep.
And but closer to that, Arizona Bioscience Week is less than a month away. And so for all of you that follow what's happening here in Arizona, there is no better time to get connected and get engaged than Arizona Bioscience Week. There are 5 days with multiple events ranging from online events for our teachers and our students in the K through 12 classrooms, all the way up to the AZBio Awards. And then this year, the AZ Advances Health Innovation Summit, which is bringing together major family offices, investment firms, health science leaders, university leaders, and one of the leading voices in Alzheimer's disease in the world, all together for a discussion on how we move health innovation forward faster. So I encourage you to check out Arizona Bioscience Week. I know I'll be there, and I bet the guys will be there too. But more importantly, thank you all for joining us today. Thank our wonderful speakers for sharing. Thank you, Dylan, for bringing us together. But most importantly, thank you to Arizona's life science community, because it is all of us together that are impacting the quality of life for patients. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week, and I'll see you at Bioscience Week. Bye-bye.